I thought I would do something a little bit different tonight. Over the years, I've gotten asked many, many times by many different listeners all over the globe, many different ages, people with different incomes. And again, this is just my opinion, but personal finance really should be taught more. Parents should teach it. Schools should teach it. The parents don't teach their kids this stuff. I didn't learn this stuff from my parents, unfortunately, well at all. It was not taught in schools. So we're going to look at a case study. And even though this guy was a successful Olympic gold medalist, we can learn from his mistakes. So the average Joe or Jane out there can understand, and I'll talk about this. I'll read the article with Ryan Lochte. There's a new show that Alex Rodriguez has out where he helps professional athletes. He's a former Major League Baseball player, made a lot of money. And he helps professional athletes who used to make a lot of money and they're on the verge of bankruptcy. So I think there's a lot of personal finance lessons here for everyone. Even though these are millionaires, they still have to deal, they still lack, in a lot of cases, the basic financial education, the basic skills, the basic personal finance skills of budgeting, saving, things like that. Very important. Living within or below your means. And unfortunately, in this environment, saving is very, very difficult. There's stagflation, tax and lie. There's devaluation of fiat currencies. But it can still be done. It's just more difficult than it was in the past. In the past, an entire family of four could live on one person's income, and it's not really the case too much anymore unless that one person is making an enormous amount of money, probably six figures or more. So let's talk about this article. This article is quoting the episode of Ryan Lochte. If you're not familiar with him, he's won many Olympic gold medals over the years. He was a swimmer for the U.S. Olympic team. He knows, the article is from 4 days ago from Kathleen Elkins from CNBC. Olympic swimmer Ryan Lochte went from earning millions to living paycheck to paycheck. Here's what he learned. Hopefully I will be able to implement with this case study a lot of important personal finance lessons for everyone. The importance of budgeting, the importance of saving. And before you learn how to invest, and it's important to learn how to invest, the average person, adult, spends more time researching what's the next car they're going to buy, where they're going to go on vacation, finding deals for that, even finding like a deal or what type of new refrigerator more than their investments. That's unfortunately what the average adult does nowadays. It's really sad. So the retirement, and it really should be the exact opposite. If you want to have enough money for retirement, the amount of time you spend researching investments should be a lot more than finding the best deals, finding, the 50% off on vacations or an extra 10 or 20% off on a vacation. Unfortunately, my mom does the exact opposite. My mom spends ungodly amounts of time researching like vacations and deals and all these things. And, she just, from what I've heard, she just screams at my dad to check the value of his stocks every day, Monday through Friday. So they don't do nearly the amount, my mom doesn't at least, nearly the amount of time researching that she should. And if she did, she would be able to afford a lot more vacations. She wouldn't have to go spend hours looking for 30% off deals. Okay, so let's, so many adults do this, especially in the United States. They've got it ass backwards. Okay, so Ryan Lochte knows what it feels like to be on top. The American swimmer won his first Olympic gold medal at the 2004 Olympic Games in Athens when he was only 20 years old. He would have won a lot more but for Michael Phelps. Michael Phelps was the best swimmer of his generation. So Ryan Lochte won, the relays with Michael Phelps, but Michael Phelps was just better. He was second best here in the U.S. So between 2004 and 2016, Ryan Lochte collected a total of 12 Olympic medals, making him one of the world's most decorated swimmers behind Michael Phelps, and earned millions along the way. The world-class athlete also knows what it feels like to hit rock bottom. There was a scandal during the 2016 Summer Olympics. He got drunk with some other swimmers and he trashed like a gas station bathroom, and it was caught on video, and he lied about it, and it was a big mess. He got suspended for he he made a big lie about it, that he was beaten up or something, or someone else did it, and then he got caught on video proving that he was lying. And it resulted in a 10-month suspension and the loss of almost all of his sponsors. 2 years later, he was suspended again by the U.S. Doping Agency for receiving a B12 infusion. During that time, he lost nearly all of his career earnings. So even though he's making millions of dollars, the average person out there, you can have emergencies. Your transmission could get blown. It could be a medical emergency. And the average person does not have savings, does not prepare for this. There's tons of articles that have come out in the last couple years with personal finance surveys that most Americans can't even afford $400 or $500 in an emergency. And it's truly sad. So yes, Ryan Lochte was very rich, but he also didn't save a lot of his money. So he made millions and millions of dollars, but he was spending it almost as fast. Him and his wife were spending it almost as fast as it was coming in. I believe he's in his mid-30s now. So he's had a celebrity reputation, fame, a lot of money coming in, and he didn't save a lot of his money. So the average person can learn from his mistakes that you should save in case of emergency. So Lochte says he went from making well over $1 million a year to earning only $75,000. So $75,000 seems like a lot, but it's a big, big drop compared to what he was earning. So he would have had to, if he was acting more rationally, he would have had to result to his savings if he had a big nest egg built up savings. And he would have had to downsize and cut his standard of living. But he didn't really do that. He didn't do a good job of that. He eventually did that with help from personal finance experts, but it took him a long time to make those adjustments. And he's really, really lucky his wife didn't leave him and divorce him during this. She stuck around. So that's a pretty rare thing nowadays, unfortunately. Because normally, from what I hear from a lot of my listeners is, as soon as the standard of living drops, like the divorce rate just goes crazy. Cheating and money reasons are sex and money reasons, or cheating, are two of the main reasons for a divorce. I think they're the top two. Money problems. So continuing with this article, he downsized his life. Alex Rodriguez met up with him, and he and his wife had already downsized from a 4,200 square foot home to only an 1,800 square foot apartment, but Lochte was still spending beyond his means and was quickly headed into massive debt. Ryan Lochte estimated he only had $20,000 in savings when things were getting bad. So this is a man that was making millions and millions of dollars, and he didn't save very much of it, or he was burning through his savings. And what the average person can do is he was reliant on all his advertiser income. And I've had advertiser income, and I've had advertisers cancel on me for no fault of my own. It's a month or two, or they made promises to me that, we're going to sign a 6-month contract, or, we're going to sign a 12-month contract. And then all of a sudden, the emails just stop. So I don't get any checks, any contract, no nothing. So advertising income can vanish very, very quickly. He did not have any contingency or emergency plans. And so Alex Rodriguez went and started changing him financially to learning more personal finance. But Lochte admitted in this episode that he hadn't looked at his bank account in 2 years. That's not... When you're making millions of dollars, I guess that you can get away with that. When you're living paycheck to paycheck and your standard of living has collapsed, it's not very smart to not look at your bank account, especially if you're not budgeting. So he was not budgeting at all. He was still spending a lot of money, even though his income went from well over $1 million a year down to $75,000. It was very humbling, and it taught him that money doesn't grow on trees. He learned more that you've got to be smart. Any paycheck that you get, whether it's $5 or $50,000, you have to put some away no matter what for savings. And this is what the average person does not do. There is a great personal finance book, one of my favorite books. It's called The Richest Man in Babylon. And it teaches you to pay yourself first. You try to, out of every paycheck, try to pay yourself 10% first in savings. So there's going to be a couple book recommendations here, because once you learn how to save, you learn budgeting, you learn saving, because people all over the world ask me this, like, well, why don't I have enough money for saving, and then why don't I have enough money to invest? And most of the time, people do not keep track of their discretionary spending. That's what it is most of the time. So normally there's like $10 a month here, $20 a month there. There's all these membership plans now, so that people are just not keeping track of, and there's a lot of these things. So if you have a handful of these things, that's an extra 50 or $100 a month, and at the end of the year, that stuff adds up. So people just don't keep track of all the things that they're signed up for, that they're paying on a monthly basis. Hopefully you're keeping track of my Patreon on a monthly basis, because I'm working hard to create high quality content for everyone here. And my Patreon account contributors are up over sixfold in the last 6 or 7 months to almost 200 now. So Richest Man in Babylon, absolutely superb book. It's a pretty quick read. So you have to, before you invest, before you have capital to invest, unless you have a lot of experience and a lot of unique skills, so a combination of those two things. If you have really good experience at something and really unique skills, then you can raise capital from someone else and build a business that way as an entrepreneur. Otherwise, if you can't raise capital from other people, family, friends, or outside investors that you don't know, with a business plan and pitch them, you're going to have your own savings, your own capital. Capitalism is savings, first and foremost. So if you don't have your own capital, you can't really be a capitalist. So you have to have savings first before you invest, normally, with most people. Doug Casey calls it produce before you consume. My friend Doug Casey says, produce before you consume, save the difference, and then learn how to invest it. Okay, back to the Ryan Lochte article. No matter how much you bring home, it's important to keep your spending in check. He adds, you have to budget your expenses. Here you go. So this is a very, very common problem. Most people do not, if they're trying to build up savings, if they're trying to build up more savings for emergency, like an emergency fund, and I don't know what the exact number is. Everyone's emergency fund, in my opinion, is different. And it's so dangerous now saving long-term in fiat currencies. So there's a handful of gold-backed savings accounts like Gold Money and Vaulted through David McIlvaney Financial. You could take immediate delivery of that physical metal, but saving long-term in fiat currency, you're not going to hear a lot of rich people talk about that. But yeah, if you have an enormous amount of money in your savings account or checking account and you hold it in cash there for a long time, it's going to be devalued by whether you have dollars, euros, yen, Chinese yuan. All these currencies are being intentionally devalued rapidly to lose more purchasing power. And then when you add in stagflate and tax and lie, shrinkflation that's happening in consumer items and food, it means that everyone's bills are going to be almost every year going up. So it's going to be harder and harder to save. And you can't save completely with just pinching pennies, just cutting all costs to the bone, especially if you're living with someone else. So partners do not like that. Even if your partner says they're on board, normally it doesn't last. So as soon as you say, I'm going to be cutting my spending now by 20, 30% to start saving money, building up an emergency fund, or money to build a business, or money to make investments, the other person you're living with, your family and your partner, are normally not on board with these things. Normally people take off after a while. They say they're on board sometimes, and normally they're gone. So what people should do, rather than just cutting expenses, they have to look for ways to create more revenue. Okay? So if you can do both, if you can be entrepreneurial, maybe create a new business or a small side business or a side hustle, something along those lines, figure out a way to grow revenue and cut your costs. You don't have to cut all your costs to the bone. You don't have to pinch every penny. Because normally if you're living with someone or your family and you cut every single penny, it's the backlash is going to be enormous. It's a lot better to figure out ways to grow revenue, because then people will be on board to help. There's more of a positive economic incentive and feedback loop to looking for ways to grow revenue. So ideally, what you want to do is figure out ways to budget, and there's tons of free budgeting software. I have links to the 9 best budgeting software. I have an article that just came out last month about this, October 2nd. And some of the budgeting software are like, you need a budget, that's a budgeting app. And then there's envelopes. Instead of envelopes, it's letter M, money. Then there's Quicken Personal Finance, there's Mint, Countabout, Money Dance, Personal Capital, Acorns. So there's a number of apps that allow you to start. You can also do it through Microsoft Excel spreadsheets if you want to start budgeting. But if you want to get very hardcore, you itemize your expenses. You itemize your expenses and you cut. And then that's how you build up savings. But what most people don't do when they're budgeting is they don't come up with new ways to grow revenue. That is really the key. Because if you can cut some expenses and then also grow revenue, you're going to have a lot of extra savings starting to come in. Okay, so back to this Ryan Lochte article. Thanks to help from Alex Rodriguez, Lochte was able to increase his income by doing speaking engagements and teaching swim clinics, making sure to set aside a portion of his earnings for the future. So Alex Rodriguez is doing exactly what I just said to help Ryan Lochte. Ryan Lochte was spending too much money. He was not budgeting. Okay, he was not saving any money. And then Alex Rodriguez was saying, well, in addition to those things, to budgeting more, to cut your expenses, to look at your itemized expenses and start budgeting more, and also saving, you need to come up with new ways to grow revenue. So come up with a list of your own unique skills, your own unique experiences, and write them down. What other things can you do with the experience you have, with the context list you have, with the skills you have accrued over the years to earn more revenue? And if you don't have a halfway decent list, you maybe need to figure out how to add more skills cheaply, which means there's tons of used books. No one wants used books anymore, for the most part, unless it's a collector's book. So there's tons of used books that you can buy to learn to read if you have free time. The average person is not going to do any of this. So there's tons of different ways it's to learn to grow revenue and side hustles, but it just requires a lot more effort. And the average person is not going to do this because most people have a 9-to-5 job and they're not getting pay increases, a lot of them. And their bills are going up, their healthcare costs are going up, and a lot of people hate their jobs. And as soon as they get home from their jobs, they're looking for any type of escape from reality, whether that's video games, porn, eating bad food, tons of things. There's a lot. There's one of the. It's a double-edged sword. Now with the relative small amounts of free markets and capitalism we have, is there's a lot of things you can buy that offers you an escape from reality. So it's both good and bad. So I like watching movies, but if I spent all my time watching movies, I wouldn't be productive at all. I wouldn't have almost 200 Patreon account contributors that I've grown it rapidly. I wouldn't have over 5 million YouTube views. I wouldn't have almost 30,000 YouTube channel subscribers, despite YouTube trying to ruin me financially again. Yeah, the key is discipline. The key is discipline. It takes a lot of discipline to build the things that I have built and read 500 books, or to learn a new skill, or to build a business. And there's a great book out there, entrepreneur book. There's a lot of overly optimistic entrepreneurs that hate this book, but I've read a lot of entrepreneurship books, dozens and dozens of them, so many of them, and a lot of them are all pretty much the same. They're way too optimistic. They're way too much unicorns and rainbows. And if you have the right positive attitude all the time, as an entrepreneur, you're going to succeed. They don't talk about burnout. They don't talk about depression. They don't talk about what happens if you spend 3 months, 4 months, 6 months working your ass off to get a deal, and then all of a sudden the person was lying and full of shit and then changes the terms of the deal when you're taking it to a lawyer and tries to fuck you over. They don't talk about any of that stuff in most entrepreneurship books. It's way too optimistic about entrepreneurship that you should always go for it. And if you don't put everything you've got into it, you have no chance of succeeding. Well, the odds are still against you because so many people will not do what they say anymore. There's a lot of people out there looking to screw you over. I have so many stories. I can't go into all of them. As an entrepreneur, I failed a lot of times just getting things here to these levels. It's been very, very difficult. I've had dozens of failed business deals. where I thought I was going to be making like thousands and thousands of dollars extra per month, and investments into my educational technology company, and paid advertising deals, and including signed paid advertising contracts that weren't honored by large companies that you would know. So they don't talk about the burnout. They don't talk about the emotional roller coaster. And that's the truth. There is good moments, but there's also a lot of adversity, a lot of frustration, anger, and even depression if you don't start getting positive results fairly quickly as an entrepreneur. And this book, The Entrepreneur Equation by Carol Roth, really, really good. It is the most balanced entrepreneurship book I've ever read. And I've read a lot of them. She has her own, she's a former investment banker. She has her own entrepreneurship TV show now. So she has this book. She has an entrepreneurship TV show where she helps entrepreneurs. And I've interviewed her in the past. It's in the archives on the channel. Carol Roth. The book is The Entrepreneur Equation. And almost all the negative reviews, if you read the negative reviews on Amazon, they're all from the unicorn and rainbows entrepreneurship crowd that are like virtue signaling and saying, how dare you tell people that they can't chase their dream? Well, she's telling people rationally that it is you're potentially going to ruin your life, and you're going to learn very, very expensive mistakes if you're not well prepared to be an entrepreneur. Trust me on this. The mistakes that you make as an entrepreneur, very time consuming and very, very expensive. So I highly recommend reading that book before you learn the hard way from very expensive, very time consuming mistakes as an entrepreneur. She lays out a bunch of different, so she thinks that people should maybe start off with side businesses and side hustles. And there's a book about that too that I've talked about in the past, earlier this year. It came out in June by Chris Guillebeau, 100 Side Hustles, Unexpected Ideas for Making Extra Money Without Quitting Your Day Job. So that has 88 5-star reviews on Amazon, also on Audible audiobooks. So it's a Carol Roth book. So after you've maybe fixed yourself financially, you've cut some of your expenses or a lot of your expenses, you're building up savings, you have an emergency fund, you have maybe diversified savings in diversified savings accounts, maybe some in a whole life. I think the whole life insurance dividend paying policy is fairly interesting. It's tax-free, and there's a lot of benefits to that. Now, I'm not going to put all my savings into there. I don't own a policy yet because my income has been so unstable lately from my podcast. But as things improve, I should be able to get one of those policies soon. And then in addition to saving in physical precious metals, you don't want to trust the system to have any money in any one bank account. There was a story that came out last month in October about how Bank of America, their mobile banking app, I think, was shut down for hours. And they didn't give a good response as to why. Probably because they were hacked. So you can't have all your savings in any one place. The new normal sucks. It's not easy anymore. You can't set it and forget it like in the past. Like just have an easy savings account and earn like 6% per year. Those days are gone. Okay, back to the Ryan Lochte article. Lochte increased his income doing speaking engagements, teaching swim clinics. Again, so Alex Rodriguez probably had Ryan Lochte do the same thing that I suggested, which is if you're looking to grow your revenues, just take out either type up like a Microsoft Word document or a Google Notepad that you're typing, or write it down pen and paper and write down skills that you have, what your experience is, combination, and then things that you can leverage your experience, your skills, your contacts list with. And if you can't do that, then if you can't write anything down, and you're not happy with the savings you have or the amount of investments you have, you need to add more skills first. Probably without taking on as much student loan debt or any at all. So Ryan Lochte, make sure to set aside a portion of his earnings for the future. He's now cut his expenses. He's growing savings, and I believe he didn't even check his checking account. So what I mean by that is I think he was writing checks and he wasn't even checking how much money was in his account. Ugh. So he eliminated expenses he doesn't necessarily need. He eliminated his Porsche, which was costing him $835 a month, I guess, on a lease. Or a car loan. It doesn't say if it was a lease or a car loan on his Porsche. If the 35-year-old father of two, because it's all about prestige. Because I mean, he's an Olympic gold medalist and he had to play his part. But I mean, it's more important about building savings and restoring his financial future, putting it on sound footing again. Especially because he's a 35-year-old father now of two. And he doesn't want to ruin his family. I mean, normally what I've heard in a lot of personal finance case studies is when the husband's income starts to drop rapidly, like the unfortunately, and this is becoming very pervasive now, the wife leaves right when the husband's already like the wife just jumped ship. So the divorce happens, and then what was already a bad problem gets exacerbated and made even worse. But luckily for Ryan Lochte, this did not happen. Okay, so budgeting. If you're looking to improve your personal finances, budgeting software, itemize your expenses, go through your monthly expenses, and see what you can cut. What's discretionary? What's not? Like putting gas in your gas tank if you have a long commute to work, that's not discretionary. Building up savings. Unfortunately, with savings now, saving in fiat currencies long term is a very dumb idea. You can save for maybe a couple years with some cash. If you think the stock market's going to crash, then there will be opportunities to deploy cash to buy stocks if the good stocks ever become cheap again. Although with this everything bubble and all the craziness that these large central banks are doing, I'm not sure. We'll see. And then finally, after you've budgeted, cut expenses, built savings, then learning how to invest. Or starting your own business, becoming an entrepreneur. But you need capital for that. You need savings. Unless you can raise capital. Get off my lawn says 4 main causes of divorce are disagreements in money, religion, in-laws, and kids. I would also say cheating. Cheating is very common. Or sexless marriage is very common too. Another reason for divorce. Joel says he's always been a saver, not an investor. You're learning. And Joel, in the past, you could have gotten 5% or 6% per year saving. In a savings account in U.S. Treasuries, you could have gotten 5 or 6% per year. And that would have allowed you to retire more comfortably, reinvest that. Certificates of deposit, those things, money markets, those used to have a lot higher yields. But what these governments and central banks are doing, because they're overly indebted, the governments are and the corporations are overly indebted, is financial repression, and they're stealing your retirement income. Because they're moving the interest rates, moving the goalposts, moving the interest rates, changing the rules, moving the interest rates down to zero. So the governments don't have to cut their budgets. So corporations, which are way over leveraged, most of the large corporations are way over leveraged, don't go bankrupt. Vaulted allows I'm not familiar with Vaulted. I haven't used Vaulted yet, but I've heard good things from friends that Vaulted allows immediate delivery of physical gold and silver. I don't know the tax consequences, though. Unfortunately for American citizens, taxing buying bullion, gold, and silver is not taxed well. Okay, I'm looking through listener questions and comments, but that's pretty much all I wanted to say. So, personal finance, they don't teach it enough in... Parents should teach it to their kids. It's not taught. So many people have to learn this on their own. They learn it after they're already deep in the hole. After they've already gotten massive student loan debt, credit card debt, etc. Then people learn it the hard way. But if parents had taught it to their kids, maybe this wouldn't have happened. So parents aren't doing a good job teaching this to their kids. My parents didn't. And schools are not teaching this either. Which hopefully I will be able to raise some money in the future for my educational technology company, and personal finance will play a part of the curriculum with virtual classrooms from experts. RR says there's too many ways to distract oneself from reality. Exactly. I agree. I mean, it's okay to watch a movie once in a while, but if all you do is play video games, which a lot of these like virtue signaling beta males are doing now, is all they're doing is they don't even want to. Some of them don't leave their parents' basement, so they don't even try to get a job anymore. All they do is just play video games. They don't even try to talk to girls. It's pretty bad. Okay, well, let me see here. Do I? Oh, I have a super chat. Thank you, Justin. I appreciate it. Okay, so that's all I wanted to say for tonight's show. Thank you, everyone, for your time. And, occasionally I may add in, because I've gotten requests in the past in the comment section for people asking me about, like, personal finance. So I'll just refer to this case study now. So even though he's a millionaire, there's still tons of lessons that you can learn in there about budgeting, saving, building up savings before you learn how to invest, and then entrepreneurship. And, going all in on entrepreneurship. So I'll give you an example. I used to watch this show, two shows called Bar Rescue by John Taffer and Restaurant Impossible by Robert Irvine. I think Restaurant Impossible just came back. And there would be people, they seem like good people, who wanted to start a restaurant. And they would say, oh, I always dreamed of owning my own business and starting a restaurant. But they didn't know how to cook. They didn't know how to do any of the things needed to run a restaurant. So if you don't have the skills, if you're not a good cook, if you don't know how to balance the books at a restaurant, if you don't know how to negotiate with suppliers, if you don't have all these skills, you're going to learn very painful mistakes. Very, very, very expensive, very, very painful mistakes. And almost all of these people that had bars and restaurants in the hole, they were all people that wanted their own business, want to own a bar or restaurant. It didn't have any of the experience or knowledge or skills to successfully run one. Any type of competitive advantage. And that's why they were over hundreds of thousands of dollars in debt. So, it's like what Carol Roth says. You're going to learn very expensive mistakes if you're trying to be an entrepreneur or start a small business and you don't already know what you're doing. Now, if you already have the skills and you're an employee and you learned all these valuable skills and your employer is not paying you enough money and you didn't get forced to sign a non-compete or something like that, and you know that you can go out on your own and build a business because everyone says that you're one of the best in your industry, that's something else. That's something entirely different. You have the experience, you have the contacts, you have the skills. That's totally different. But the major mistake people make with entrepreneurship is they don't have a good business plan, they don't have the right skills, they don't have the right experience, they're not working with the people who have the things they lack, who complement them, or who can raise capital, And then they're going to learn very, very expensive, very, very costly mistakes. And then if you're married and you lose most of your savings, then you're looking at divorce and a lot of other problems. It starts to snowball and get out of control. A very, very negative positive feedback loop. Disastrous positive feedback loop. Okay, thank you for the super chat, RR, and thank you for the super chat, Greg. Much appreciated. Well, I was just, stalemate, I was just using restaurants as an example of people that want to own a restaurant, that don't know how to cook, don't know how to balance the books accounting, don't know how to buy the equipment at the right price. And so they jump in with both feet and they don't even know what they're doing, and they're going to lose all their life savings. They're going to, I've listened to watched a lot of those shows, and those people lose their life savings and then they end up running up hundreds of thousands in debt. Yes, I'm well aware that restaurants in general are not high profit margin. Carl says 75% of small businesses fail. Yeah, like a large percentage of businesses fail in the first couple years or 5 years. And 90% of them fail, I think, after like 10 years. But if you're doing a side hustle and you're making an extra $1,000 a month, or you own some rental properties that are bringing in some extra cash flow, so there's ways to grow revenue. Most personal finance experts only talk about cutting expenses to the bone. They do not talk about growing revenue. It's more important as important as it is to figure out ways to cut expenses to build up savings. If you only do that, you're gonna end up depressed. You're gonna the people around you are gonna be very fed up with you and angry and frustrated. And if you're married, it could end in divorce. You have to focus on growing revenues. And if you do both, if you cut expenses and grow revenues, then you're going to supercharge your finances. You're going to have that extra discretionary income, that extra savings, and then you can start learning to invest. And there will be more opportunities as either an investor in different asset classes, either real estate, stocks, gold, commodities, a bunch of other things, or starting your own business. No, I didn't read Bob Moriarty's book. I don't like him very much. I met him in person in Toronto. He was very rude. I was polite, and I did not say anything mean to him whatsoever, and he just was totally rude. Very obnoxious. Let's just say I don't think I trust anything he says. That's all I'm going to say. I mean, most of the junior mining stocks, he made a lot of money. Bob made a lot of money off those junior miners, and a lot of people I know lost a lot of money. That's all I'm going to say. Okay, that's it. Thank you, everyone. I'll keep working on very interesting, unique content for the rest of the week.